tax Americans for another.
Meanwhile, Matt Gaetz is explaining why he's holding out on the Kevin McCarthy's debt ceiling plan. Insanity ensues with the National Republican Party, which, again, has decided we're going to make it so that, like, you can have, like, a literal carcass. Like, not like a walking and talking carcass like last time around, where, like, Joe Biden is literally dead and propped up with sticks this time, and the country will still vote for him. Because what is our forward-facing national policy proposal? Oh, that's right. We're going to make it so that it's harder for people to maintain their entitlements, maintain their benefits, maintain their social safety nets, because we have this wanton, inconsiderate attitude towards the working poor. And what are we going to do about it? Oh, that's right. We are going to hold up the national debt. Like, we're going to tank the global economy so that, like, there are more fucking provisions here. You know what I mean? There are, more rules and loopholes to jump through that you have to, like, literally work to fucking survive.
For 4 years, the nation is at risk of a potential economic disaster. Thanks to partisan and intra-party politics in Washington, the U.S. is scheduled to default on its debt as early as June, something that's never happened before. And if the nation defaults, that means massive job losses, almost assures a recession. Federal benefits like Social Security are at risk. Interest rates, what you pay on your house, your car, your college loan, they all skyrocket. The stock market, it tumbles, dragging with it your 401ks. I know what you're thinking. You're saying, Michael, come on, we've seen the movie before and we know how it ends. They're going to figure it out just before the clock hits midnight. Since 1960, Congress has acted 78 separate times to permanently raise, temporarily extend, or revise the definition of the debt limit. It's all seemed to work itself out, but in life, there are no guarantees. Republicans are demanding more than $4 trillion in spending cuts in exchange for lifting the debt ceiling. But President Biden insists that budget talks shouldn't be included in something this consequential, even as some in his own party are pressing him to negotiate.
This is his job. This is the responsibility of the leader of the...
Hey, fuck you. Shut the fuck up. Shut up. You're a fucking bitch. I hate you. Joe Biden gifted Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema fucking bills, dude. Never forget that. Never forget that this fucking decrepit old corpse gifted these two fucking vultures, one of which left the party. The other one's too much of a pussy to actually do so. Like, gifted them bills. Ay, ay, ay.
The free world, and definitely the United States president, he has to negotiate.
The debt ceiling now stands at $31.4 trillion. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy can only afford to lose 4 potential GOP votes to pass the bill. So it leaves him trying to appeal to all of his party's factions in order to get the votes on his own plan. House GOP leaders were initially pushing for a floor vote tomorrow on their plan, which would raise the ceiling for a year in exchange for deep spending cuts. But now McCarthy's opened the door to pushing back the timeline, saying a vote will come this week.
You have to change the bill to get 218 votes. I will let you know. Do you have 218 votes on this? You're the first person I'm going to call.
A decade ago, a debt standoff did have catastrophic consequences. As the Washington Post notes, that fight in 2011 between ascendant conservative Tea Party Republicans and President Barack Obama rattled the stock market, precipitated a downgrade in U.S. credit, and ultimately cost taxpayers more than $1 billion. You know who led?
You know who didn't get fucking punishments out of that, though? Republicans.
Negotiations with Republicans back then? Joe Biden, when he was serving as vice president. He negotiated back then, so why not now? How dire are things? Well, on the day that he's announcing his re-election bid, the president cited Donald Trump.
Little I think I'd be quoting Donald Trump, but even Donald Trump said, I can't imagine anyone ever thinking of using the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge. Folks, America's not a deadbeat nation.
Oh my God. This narrative is so stupid. Just talk about economic doom and gloom that Republicans are fucking using as a weapon to do what? To do what? What does Kevin McCarthy want out of these negotiations? Something that is deeply and undesirably unpopular. Something that Donald Trump knows is deeply and undesirably unpopular. That's it. What happened? Mini F there? I'm not seeing it. It's not on my end. It's not happening. Hold on. Hold on. I'll run my Windows MTR, but just to be on the safe side. Every time there's like a mini baby hiccup, I'm like freaked out. Anyway, let's see how this works. It was 1 second. Chat is dumb. I mean, it's okay. Let's continue.
We pay our bills.
By the way, under Trump, the U.S. debt increased by nearly $8 trillion, and Congress voted to increase the debt ceiling 3 times without demands. But Republicans are now seizing on the issue as leverage. This brings me back to McCarthy and a massive leadership test. He has a caucus of 222. He needs to secure 218 votes to pass his plan and send it to a near certain defeat in the Senate. If he loses 5, he can't get it done unless...
What are they going to do? Like, you're really telling me that, like, Republicans in contested districts in the House are going to be like, yeah, we want to fucking make sure that we cut social safety nets further right now. Like, that's the reason why we are doing our very best to, like, just hold a gun to the head of the global economy, not just the American economy. It's so fucking stupid. And I don't think it's going to happen. But hey, what the fuck do I know? The Republican speaker has stuck to partisan bills that have kept his party united. That ends with a tough vote to raise the debt limit in exchange for spending cuts. Like, do you really want the entirety of the National Republican Party to be hammered with, like, they want to fucking make the old people die? Like, this is such a bad move that I'm surprised Donald Trump hasn't come out and talked about it. Like, no one is demanding this. The National Republican Party is, like, not on board with it. Most of them don't care about the optics of spending cuts. They care about being primaried from the right if they don't vote for it. Yeah, but it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter because, like, I mean, I guess that they are relying on the Democratic Party's feckless ineptitude that gives them a lot of leeway to do these insane things because they won't suffer any punishments, at least on the narrative front, because the Democrats are wholly incapable of doing anything that's good. But having said that, it's still something that is so... McCarthy himself is internally weak. And also on top of that, like, there are Democrats in contested seats that are not only worried about being primaried from the right, but, like, a lot of people recognize that this concept, if they advocate for it, is going to hurt them. Conservatives, when the country's about to break... No. Conservatives have killed their voter base. That's true. Conservatives don't care about what happens to their voter base, but they do care about sitting on their fucking seats. And, like, in this day and age, spending cuts are not necessarily a narrative that actually works. I mean, Donald Trump fucking literally beefed up the economy and gave like direct stimmies, if you remember, during COVID. You know what I mean? It's not like a thing that Republicans City is funny. Shitty? What the fuck? Kaya. President Biden has dismissed it as a MAGA economic agenda that includes spending cuts for working and middle-class folks. I mean, that's precisely what it is. God, I love this dog so much. They and other Democrats have condemned the legislation as recklessly austere, and fiscally misguided, and argued that in pushing it, Republicans are precipitating a debt crisis by tying unreasonable conditions to any vote to lift the debt ceiling. The statutory borrowing limit is expected to be reached by this summer, pushing the country into default unless Congress acts to raise it. It's such a stupid fucking tool, too. The debt ceiling, also called the debt limit, is a cap on the total amount of money that the federal government is authorized to borrow via U.S. Treasury securities, such as bills and saving bonds, to fulfill its financial obligations. Because the United States runs budget deficits, it must borrow huge sums of money to pay its bills. America hit its technical debt limit on January 19th. The Treasury Department will now begin using its extraordinary measures to continue paying the government's obligations. These measures are essentially fiscal accounting tools that curb certain government investments so that the bills continue to be paid. Those options can be exhausted by June. What's at stake? Once the government exhausts its extraordinary measures and runs out of cash, it would be unable to issue new debt and pay its bills. The government can wind up defaulting on its debt if it's unable to make required payments to its bondholders. Such a scenario would be economically devastating and could plunge the globe into a financial crisis. It could, and it would actually. Here, let's watch like a YouTube video on what the debt ceiling is and what the fuck this means. You know what I mean? How about that? Sure, there's like a Vox explainer on it, you know? Here.
These grades aren't for students. They're for businesses, based on how likely the company is to pay its debts back.
Kaya is a hardcore
A company like
conservative, yes.
Microsoft has the best grade possible, AAA, since they have a long history of paying people on time.
The internet is about driving profitability.
But a newer company like Tesla has a BB rating.
Fundamentally change the equation. You've got to have an all-electric vehicle.
And that affects their interest rates. Microsoft pays its investors 2.5% interest. Tesla pays a bit more at 5.3%. The riskier the grade, the higher the interest rate. But it's not just companies that have grades. Countries do too. The United States, for a really long time, had a AAA rating. Until
lawmakers have just 2 more days to raise the nation's debt ceiling and avoid a catastrophic
default on its loans, which could create turmoil in the U.S. economy and worldwide.
The U.S. has a weird thing called the debt ceiling, which is just a limit on how much debt the country can take on. If the national debt reaches that limit, the U.S. might not be able to pay its investors. The U.S. regularly comes close to hitting it, but the government always ends up raising it. Until 2011, when it almost didn't. After that, the U.S. was downgraded for the first time due to, quote, political risks. Since then, Congress and the president have had to raise it 7 more times. It's becoming an almost annual task. And of course, it always goes super swell.
The entire basis of the Republican strategy is we're going to shut down the government or cause economic chaos if we don't get 100% of what we want.
This isn't some damn game.
My Republican friends need to stop playing Russian roulette.
Russian roulette with the economy.
In the last 20 years, the U.S. has borrowed more and more money. The national debt is at an all-time high. But how should we feel about this debt? And what happens if we don't pay it back? The U.S. national debt is nearing $29 trillion with a capital T. Depending on when you watch this, it might already be there. It's best not to look at it as a number, but instead as a comparison to the size of the economy. You'll see the U.S. takes on more debt when the country spends a lot, because of wars or because of investments needed during recessions and now pandemics. And the department in charge of all this is the U.S. Treasury. They collect taxes and spend them to fund the government. And for the record, it's Congress and the president who decide how much taxes should be and where the money should be spent. The Treasury just handles the flow of money. But for essentially ever, they approve more spending than they bring in with taxes. So the Treasury has to make up that difference by taking on debt. And it does that by selling bonds. They can vary, but generally it works like this. You buy a $1,000 30-year bond at a locked-in 2% interest rate. Every year, the Treasury sends you $20, the 2% interest you've earned. And after 30 years, you can cash out the bond and get your $1,000 back. It's a win-win situation. The U.S. gets money to fund the government, and you make some profit on a safe investment. More than a third of these bonds, and therefore the total U.S. debt, are owned by Americans and American companies. Investors, and also banks, local governments, and even pension funds, keep their money in bonds. And the largest part is owned by the federal government. The federal government owns part of the federal government's debt. The money for Social Security is actually kept in bonds. So is the money for Medicare and federal pensions. The Federal Reserve has bonds too. Foreign investors only own a quarter of the U.S. debt. And while Chinese investors used to have the largest share, Japanese investors actually own more now. They own around 4% of all U.S. debt. And it is a lot of debt. Of all the developed countries, the U.S. has the fourth largest debt compared to the size of the economy. So is this bad?
The really, really frustrating answer is we don't know.
Debt has pros and cons. One question is, what are you doing with the debt?
When you're in an economic recession or an emergency, not only should you borrow, you should borrow a lot. But what you shouldn't do is borrow when your economy is strong and the political inconvenience of paying for things is too high.
Another really important question is, what are interest rates? In recent years, interest rates have been very low. That tends to make it easier to borrow and to sustain that borrowing. Where we are now doesn't make me, as of now, very nervous.
I worry about the debt a lot more than he does.
While all countries take on debt, only these two have debt ceilings. Denmark's, however, is kept so high, they're not going to come close to hitting it. Unlike the United States, where the government is constantly having to raise the debt ceiling to pay for spending they already approved.
That's the big problem with the debt limit, is it's internally contradictory. The government passes a law that says you have to spend 10. It passes a law saying you can only collect 8 in taxes. And then it passes another law saying you're not allowed to borrow 2.
If the U.S. does hit the debt ceiling, it would mean the Treasury couldn't issue any more bonds, so no more debt revenue. Taxes would still be coming in, but that's not enough to cover all these responsibilities. So maybe they stop paying federal employees or stop spending money for programs. But at some point, they won't be able to pay the interest to these investors or cash out Social Security bonds. That's called a default. It's never happened yet.
You couldn't do more to sabotage your financial system than default.
Interest rates could rise based on a reassessment that the United States was considerably riskier than people had thought before. When government bond interest rates go up, that usually means that other interest rates are going up.
If you borrow for anything, whether it's for a dishwasher, a car, college, or your credit card, that's going to become more costly. We're going to lose jobs. Wages won't go up as high.
We could be like these countries and just not have a debt limit.
Pretty much literally fucking, what do you mean? Almost all of them. Every single OECD nation.
Or have one so high it's never a threat to the economy. Because if Congress and the president really want to take on less debt, they can change the tax system or reduce spending.
The debt limit does make sense if you are a functioning Congress. They're saying we need to put in place some policy to make sure that we don't borrow more than we mean
Why?
to, or we stop and we pause and we check on the borrowing.
Why?
That certainly isn't how it is working.
Why?
The simplest thing would just be to repeal it and be like almost every other country in the world.
Even if the U.S. never actually defaults on its debt, just the mere political fights and will they or won't they unease could make the United States a less desirable place to invest.
It's long been seen as this is kind of the safest asset that you can invest in. And so that's given the U.S. a lot of advantages. But the more our political system is so polarized and dysfunctional, the more that it becomes a little bit questioned of whether the U.S. should have the incredible advantage that it has.
Also, like, we constantly talk about a deficit or our debt. And what's also always hilarious about this conversation that, like, there are ways to fill up our coffers, except for some weird reason, anytime a Republican or a Democrat has any kind of fucking legislation that they can pass, it almost always revolves around not taxing the fucking wealthy. And if anything, reducing the amount of taxes, which, of course, in turn has that negative effect. There's that, too. That's the real T word out there. You know what I mean?
Thus far.
I love that. Anyway, great stuff overall. Let's hear
Less he has Democrats on his side.
Thoughts on 2017 tax cut during the great economy? Ooh, I do have some thoughts on that. Here, let's go to 2017. What did Hassan Piker say? There was one specifically that I covered when I was talking about. Here are the proposed cuts to veterans. The 2017 tax cuts were fucking atrocious. They were awful. They were completely ridiculous. And it should not have happened. And yet it happened for no fucking reason whatsoever. And the worst part about it is, all of the tax cuts that were proposed for, like, the working poor and middle class, you know, working class Americans, they've already sunsetted. The only real tax cuts that were fucking permanent, and you might have guessed it, is ones that were given to the wealthy and corporations. That's right. Thanks, Donald Trump.
Okay. Great. Again.
Our founding fathers never, ever anticipated a swamp like the one we have today. Like this guy, Steve Schwartzman, who's made over $400 million in 1 year. And percentage-wise, well, guess what? His tax bracket is actually lower than a New York City cop. How do you like that? And it's because he calls his income investment. The president promised to fix this, remember?
We will eliminate the carried interest deduction and other special interest loopholes that have been so good for Wall Street investors and for people like me.
But neither the House nor the Senate ever bothered to address this.
I love this version of American democracy where we have to literally beg our representatives not to vote on things that will kill us each week, and then they go ahead and do it anyway, and then they brag about it after. I love it almost as much as I love plugging my Instagram, which you should follow. Follow my Instagram at Hasanabi Piker.
The individual mandate is being repealed. That means Obamacare is being repealed.
Yeah, if you didn't know that Obamacare was being repealed because of this tax reform, it means that you haven't been watching my videos, but it also was deliberate. They deliberately snuck that in. Here's Trump gloating about crippling the American healthcare system.
We didn't want to bring it up. I told people specifically, be quiet with the fake news media because I don't want them talking too much about it.
It really instills confidence in the people who still want to believe that we live in a representative democracy when you brag about how you slipped in a provision that will take away healthcare from 13 million Americans. You bragged about it like you brag about grabbing pussies, especially after months of people fighting to stop you from doing just that, especially after you personally promised you wouldn't do that
This
over
wasn't
and
what I was
over
talking
again.
about.
Save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without cuts. Have to do it.
But now we have spineless Paul Ryan drooling with ecstasy on morning talk shows, discussing how he'll take away more of the already underfunded social programs from poor children and their families.
We have to address entitlements, otherwise we can't really get our handle on our future debt.
Here's a thought on how to get a handle on our future debt. Just don't cut taxes for the wealthy and corporations by $4.6 trillion. I think that's a good place to start.
There's two things you need to do to get the debt under control so that our kids and our grandkids get a debt-free nation. Number one, grow the economy.
The only future that Paul Ryan dreams about for our grandchildren is one where they have to be slaves in Amazon factories strapped to robot cyborgs that literally punish them if they are not as efficient as possible and calls them welfare queens. Go on, Paul. How will these tax cuts grow the economy exactly?
Workers benefit, wages go up, more jobs occur.
Here's another Paul Ryan pipe dream, is thinking that these companies that are already showing record high profits will all of a sudden not exploit labor when given bigger tax cuts. And since they have the most anarcho-capitalist administration in modern times, CEOs don't even feel the need to lie about it. And look, you might be thinking, oh, Hassan, you're wearing an anti-fascist t-shirt, you're a libtard cuck. Well, don't ask me. Look, here's a room full of CEOs literally telling you the truth.
If the tax reform bill goes through, do you plan to increase investment? Just a show of hands?
Why aren't the other hands up?
Why aren't the other hands up? We're gonna melt all the poor people for job creation, of course. All you MAGA dinguses who thought this administration had your best interests at heart because they let you get away with Nazi LARPing, well, joke's on you, okay? Enjoy the financial equivalent of that meaningless benefit in the form of saving $5 on your federal taxes, or in many instances, just like Sig Heiling in public will still get you punched in the face on Live Leak, after these cuts, you'll actually still end up paying more in taxes. But sleep well in your crusty MAGA embroidered clan sheet, knowing that this tax reform was crafted to only benefit people like this guy.
My father said to me, Wyatt, you can do whatever you want to in life.
Because we're billionaires, son, with a fucking B. That's why I became a sailboat enthusiast. And that's why you can become, I don't know what the fuck to call Wyatt, so I'll just let him explain. He makes these epilepsy-inducing vomit shit-stained shirts for...
I want my shirts to be able to be worn in the boardroom or in a discoteca or a nightclub or on a yacht.
This discoteca enthusiast, Wyatt Koch, is going to get every penny trickling down from his grandfather because he's a job creator. Wyatt is the ultimate failson of the lesser known and also fucked up Koch brother, Bill Koch. Now, all three of the Koch brothers initially made their money the old-fashioned way, by being born with a shitload of it. But now they make money by selling you these products and by drilling oil, and they're basically famous for destroying our economy and political process by bankrolling almost every conservative organization out there. But back to Wyatt, who made fashion his passion. He'll get every penny as long as Bill Koch...
Zion, you bought some of these shirts, be real? I didn't, but they sent it in my P.O. box. I've worn it before.
dies after 2024 because this tax bill will abolish the estate tax by then. And to make up for those trillions of dollars that will be going in debt, Republicans made provisions that will raise healthcare premiums so the couple $100 poor households might save on these taxes each year, before they go up again in 10 years that is, will be meaningless. But be happy knowing that in 10 years, people making over $1 million annually will be saving a whopping $5.8 billion in taxes, while you will be paying $5.3 billion more in taxes to make up for that. These tax cuts are what every member of the Republican Party dreams about. They love pleasuring the rich as much as they can and fucking the poor, so wake the fuck up. Get involved and get active. Make them all pay, because we have officially entered what historians will refer to as the pre-guillotine period in American history. Do your part. Share this video. Join the activists. Vote those fucking conservatives out of Congress.
You look like a Fenerbahce player. Thanks, man. I'm so tired. You have a lot of frecklies. I don't know what was up with the weird exposure on this one.
The question is, can the speaker get this done with only Republicans? Did the deal that he cut to become speaker limit his options? One of the debt plan holdouts is Matt Gaetz. Yes, the same thorn.
Thanks for the content lately. Been helping with a bunch of shit. With with some shit in life. Yeah, like being perma-stuck as Hasanabi on Twitter. Right, Carter? No, I'm just kidding. I hope everything's all right, man.
in McCarthy's side who delayed his election as Speaker. The GOP congressman from Florida, he joins me now. Congressman, welcome back. So when did Republicans find religion on spending?
Well, I think you've seen a little more than a dozen of us never vote for an increase in the debt limit. And so to do so, there has to be substantial downward pressure on spending. We're deeply concerned about a $32 trillion debt, what that means in terms of the dollar's position as the global reserve currency, and the extent to which government spending is driving the very inflation that we were elected to check. So we think Joe Biden should negotiate. That's what Democrat Joe Manchin said. That's what Democrat House member Jared Moskowitz said. And I think the American people understand that those negotiations are necessary in divided government.
My parents always said time and a place when they were raising my brother and me. Is this the time? Is this the place? And what I mean by that is we've already made these commitments. It would be like me with a spending problem. Instead of curbing my spending, now instead risking default and saying to creditors, no, I'm not going to honor the commitments that I've made.
No, I speak from personal experience when I say that when you've maxed out your credit cards, it's a pretty good time to evaluate your spending habits. And in the 7 years I've been in Congress, we haven't honored the true budget process even once. And so the debt limit presents a unique opportunity to try to put downward pressure on spending. 4 times when Joe Biden, as a United States Senator, voted to raise the debt limit, he demanded corresponding spending cuts. When Joe Biden didn't vote to raise the debt limit, he said it was because there weren't spending cuts at times. So if we had Joe Biden as president with the same perspective as Joe Biden as vice president or as senator, we'd probably...
The worst part about this is that, like, there is some truth to what he's saying, because Joe Brandon has historically been like this fucking let's negotiate with the Republicans cuck. So he can just point to like the many times when Joe Brandon has negotiated with the Republicans and been like, man, guess what? Look alive, Jack. We'll do some spending cuts for you.
Have more negotiating going on now than we do.
Are the issues that you personally are raising, are they worth delaying this whole process? My understanding is that you're fixated on work rules and whether they begin in fiscal year 2024. I don't want to lose everybody in the weeds, versus fiscal year 2025. It seems like you're tinkering at the margins.
Welfare to work should be a cornerstone of these negotiations. If Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich could make welfare to work deals, then certainly we should be able to make those with Joe Biden. And if any feature of this deal is sincere, it will start immediately. The oldest trick in Washington is to delay things 2, 3, 5 years down the road, to tell the voters that you believe in them, but to get the spending now and the cuts delayed. I'm not falling for that trick. My colleagues who put conditions on Speaker McCarthy are not going to fall for that trick. And let me answer the question you asked in your monologue. Absolutely. Features of the deal that allowed Kevin McCarthy to ascend to the speakership require him to fight on top line spending levels in this debt limit battle and to not delay that for the appropriations process that usually gets rolled up in one big omnibus bill.
Could this lead to, my recollection of the whole fight over him being elected speaker is that the resolution was that a single member could call for his ouster. You correct me if I'm wrong. Could this lead to that? Could you or one of your colleagues conceptually be calling for his ouster because of this impasse?
No one is looking to lower the sword of Damocles quite yet, Michael. Right now, we're working to get a responsible fiscal policy sent to the Senate. We believe that puts pressure on Schumer and Biden to work with us to try to avoid the catastrophic consequences you mentioned. But don't forget, there are also catastrophic consequences if we continue to drive these deficits up and this debt further and further into the future. That risks every economic opportunity for every American. And if we lose this dollar and if inflation continues, the savagery to the American family and the American economy will be severe.
The caucus is 222. You know the math. Speaker McCarthy, can lose 4. Right now, how many holdouts are there, yourself included?
twice that. So I do not expect that there will be a vote as planned tomorrow on the McCarthy debt limit increase. I think there are still a few details we have to work out on work requirements, on some of the Green New Deal tax credits that we would like to see repealed, and there's some disagreement in our conference about that. And if we're able to get that done, I don't think it'll be tomorrow. I think that there's still some time for the cement to dry.
So,
but it may very well be that what we send out of the House with 218 votes is the only thing we can get 218 votes for. Mr. Schumer and President Biden should take note of that.
Okay, so I'm hearing Matt Gaetz say that there are 8 holdouts as of this moment in time. There won't be a vote tomorrow. Have you personally spoken to Kevin McCarthy about this?
I wasn't able to speak to him this evening, but I spoke to members of his leadership team. I made very clear where I stood, and several of my colleagues did the same. And they've been public about it. And so I think that there's still a little work to do, but I don't despair that. I think that what the American people want to see is that people putting aside partisan affiliation and working together to reduce spending and to not have the catastrophic impact of defaulting, which is not something anybody wants to see.
You heard me say at the outset, I addressed the subject with some level of trepidation because I feel like viewers across the country are saying, we've heard it all before, and they always seem to work this out. Is this going to get worked out?
I hope so. And there's a lot of momentum toward that. But ultimately, the Democrats get a vote as well. My Republican colleagues would like to see a plan that actually starts to bend that curve of exponentially increasing spending. We want to claw back some of the COVID funds that are unobligated. We want pro-growth policies like H.R. 1 on energy. We want the REINS Act to curb the administrative state. And if we do all that, there could potentially be a deal on the table. But the Democrats have to understand we control one.
I just don't. Like, this is for nobody other than like Matt Walsh and a couple people that want to gain national prominence and like supposedly liberal media giving them that national prominence that they're desperately seeking. It's not something that people are demanding. It's not something that's going to be helpful. It's not good policy. And worst of all, it's not even good politics. It's just having some level of attention placed upon you. It's like an unruly child. No question about the FBI investigating him. Remember, they dropped it, so he's of course his Venmo to the 17-year-old girl was totally valid, and his friendship with like currently in jail pedophile was just totally normal and valid, and so we just don't know.
Half of 1/3 of the government, and we are going to maximize that leverage to achieve our goals.
I get it. I would just say in closing, I've spoken to the folks at the Peterson Foundation. I'm sure the audience knows the commercials to which I refer. Peter Peterson, I think his name, left $1 billion to focus the public's attention on this issue. And they make the point that we're in the fix we are, the $31 trillion, because of R's and D's. Both have spent too much. Final word?
I am eager to work with any Democrat who can see areas of our federal spending where we can curb and cut. Maybe we could agree to spend some less money to Ukraine. I mean, if we're at the debt limit for...
Yeah, man, that's what you actually want, truly. Yeah. It's like, dude, how about you focus on spending money at the top of the hour in the form of a $5 a month subscription, okay? Because at the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break, and if you no longer want to see those ads, as many people don't, totally valid, totally normal, then all you need to do is subscribe, which you could do for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime by connecting your Amazon Prime account through your Twitch account, where you get 1 free Prime subscription a month. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. Hopefully that's me. You know what I mean? You can also get gifted a sub if you're lucky. Yes, for the chatters who are noticing, I am sick. I'm sick. Sick and tired of you motherfuckers watching ads at the top of the hour. Subscribe so you avoid it. No. Yeah, I haven't been sleeping a lot for obvious reasons, and everything is going to be fine. Everything is I'm going to get better. Just going to be a transition period where it's relatively difficult to take care of a little doggo. My guy should make a shorter stream today. Stay healthy. No, I can't do that because I'm actually behind on my fucking hours. I realized, and I might not make my 180 contract stipulated hours this month.
For our country, why are we funding the government of another country? Seems like a reasonable thing that Republicans and Democrats ought to be able to work on. But I agree, both parties have contributed to this mess, and it's probably going to take both parties negotiating to get out of it.
We'll come back and discuss that later, because the answer is because they're facing a savage invasion at the hands of Vladimir Putin, and we're defending democracy.
Well, at a very high cost to Americans, and I wonder whether or not we're extending the frequency of that savagery or not.
Congressman Gates, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael.